Today on CityCast DC, are DC restaurants in a Trump slump? It sure looks that way. Between springtime mass layoffs that hit people's wallets, a summertime police takeover that turned a lot of folks off of going out, and an ongoing ICE crackdown that has upended the restaurant labor pool, the industry is facing a lot of headwinds resulting from this administration's choices. Jessica Sidman from Washingtonian is DC's top reporter on the industry, and she's here to share some of her reporting. Today is Thursday, December 18th. I'm Michael Schaefer, and here's what DC is talking about. Hey, Jessica Sidman, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
So you got a big feature in Washingtonian, in the December issue for the print readers out there, all about what you call the Trump dining slump. What kind of slump are we talking about?
Yeah, well, it's no secret to anyone who lives in Washington that this has been a little bit of a chaotic year with this administration. And, the dining scene is no exception. It's impacted in a way that I think people don't really fully realize. Just talking to chefs and restaurateurs on a regular basis, the vibes are bad. Business is down. And many of the reasons have to do with things that this administration has been doing.
So the most obvious, I guess, would be, they are talking about laying off vast numbers of federal workers, moving large chunks of the federal government to other places, and the kind of DOGE cuts, unlike in the past, also hit government contractors. That is a lot of people's work. So if people are worried they're going to lose their job or have already lost their job, they're probably not going to be spending money going out to eat at some of the chefs you hang out with. Is it just that, or is there other stuff going on?
There's more than that. I mean, that's definitely a big one. And there's obviously a trickle down effect with the local economy. If people are worried about their jobs or lost their jobs, they're not going to be spending as much. And, dining out might be one of the first things that they cut out of their budget.
What kind of fall off are we talking about, percentage-wise?
It really depends because there's so many, I can't give you like a specific number because, again, it depends on the business. There's so many factors, which we'll get into, that are happening all at once. It's hard to attribute it to any specific thing, but I just kind of keep that in mind as, one factor. The other really big one has been this immigration crackdown. The restaurant industry is run by immigrants, some undocumented, some who have legal status but still fear being picked up by ICE or federal officials who've descended on DC. And, when there was that big federal law enforcement blitz back in August, especially, you really saw restaurants kind of get quiet and people being very fearful to go to work. And, it got a lot of attention those first few weeks, but a lot of that has lingered kind of beneath the surface.
And is that like a money thing? I mean, the sort of conservative immigration argument would be these restaurants and the bougies who go to them have benefited for decades from this pool of cheap labor that is paid under the table thanks to mass immigration. And finally enforcing the law will force these people to actually pay people the wages that they're required to pay by law. Or pay people better because if it takes, a much bigger wage to get someone to come chop onions for you for 4 hours, it's worth it. Is it that they have to pay more for labor now? Or is it that literally there aren't people who are interested in or know how to do that work?
It doesn't have to do with the wages, because the thing is, a lot of people who are undocumented, they might not give the, real documentation. So a lot of times the businesses don't actually know if the workers are undocumented. And a lot of restaurant owners are like discovering that some of their workers are undocumented for the first time with some of this crackdown. So it's not like they were being paid under the table. I mean, maybe that happens, but I don't think that's a very big thing that's happening. I think, from the restaurant's perspective, they think, they have the proper documents, or maybe they don't look at it closely. And, those people are paying their taxes or Social Security, all that. And so it's really more of a labor issue where, you've had people who are detained, people afraid, at least at the beginning, who are afraid to show up to work.
Of course. And they're afraid of being tossed just because of what they look like.
Yeah, absolutely. And just as one example, there was a chef who I spoke to who's from Mexico, and he does have legal status. He has a work permit, but he's been really afraid to just be picked up anyway. And instead of driving his own car to work or taking the metro, he started taking an Uber to work because he had heard these stories about ICE, following people. And he basically said, it's like I'm still living in the pandemic because I only go to work and home, and it's not worth the risk to me to be out and about a lot. So,
but how does this affect the health of the restaurant itself? Are restaurants, because people aren't coming to work because they're having a harder time finding labor, does that mean what? They're closing earlier? They're having smaller menus? They're doing stuff that chases off customers because they're not as good?
Yeah, I mean, it could have effect on all of those things. It might mean, having to pare down the menu. It might mean not being able to seat as many people if you don't have the staff to take care of them. It might have to, be changing the hours of the business. So all of the above, really.
All of that's happened.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, not, there are stories anecdotally here and there, but I'd say all of those things have definitely happened.
And then during that Trump initial takeover of the MPD and the blitz of federal law enforcement, I also heard from people on the other side, and restaurant owners saying that customers had vanished, that people weren't going out either, which is, different than the workers vanishing. And if you're a restaurant, that's the money coming in the door that's not coming in the door. Why did that happen?
Yeah, I think, just this chilling effect. I mean, first of all, let's not forget that immigrants are also the diners, right? They're not just the ones working in the kitchen. But also, I think just the images of, police and fatigues and, armed figures, it's not very appetizing. I think
night
people,
on the town.
Yeah, it didn't really feel like, let's have a festive night on the town. Didn't feel very celebratory. So especially, those first few weeks people were staying in. And I think the thing that actually surprised me was that a lot of that lingered into September and even October. Which then, of course, there was the government shutdown, which we could talk about as well. But September and October are usually really busy months for restaurants. But that wasn't totally the case. I spoke to several restaurateurs who said it was just slower than usual. Better than August for sure, but it wasn't the boost they were hoping for.
New Year's plans are always tough. You don't want to go out and spend $5 bajillion to get into some stuffy, overcrowded club, but staying in isn't really an option. Look no further than the Black Cat New Year's Swing Ball. It's DC's most legendary and longest-running big band night, with non-stop music from Peaches O'Dell and her big band orchestra. Plus, games and fun for just $35. It is one of the best deals in town. No dress code and a relaxed atmosphere that caters to everyone. Grab your tickets at blackcatdc.com now. That's blackcatdc.com.
Hey, life can change in an instant, and that can feel especially true in the holiday and winter months. One moment everything feels normal, and the next someone else's mistake turns your world upside down. That's why you need a team you can count on. NACE Law Group has been standing up for DC families for decades, fighting for neighbors hurt by medical malpractice, wrongful deaths, and serious injuries. They don't just settle quickly or push papers. They dig in, fight hard, and make sure every client gets the justice they deserve. And here's something we love. They're a longtime supporter of CityCast because just like us, they care about this community and the people who call it home. So if you or someone you care about has been hurt this season, don't wait. Call NACE Law Group. They'll stand with you, fight for your family, and make sure your rights are protected so you can focus on what matters most. Visit WashingtonDCInjuryLawyers.com. That's WashingtonDCInjuryLawyers.com. Finding fresh holiday gifts for loved ones year after year can be tough, but in my family, there's one thing that never, ever fails. That's pictures of my kids, or sometimes me. That's where Aura Frames comes in. It's truly the gift that keeps on giving. You preload the photos before it ships, then you keep adding from anywhere, anytime. Upload unlimited photo and video. Every frame comes packaged in a premium gift box with no price tag. You can't wrap togetherness, but you can frame it. For a limited time, save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off Aura's best-selling Carver Matte frames, named #1 by Wirecutter, by using promo code CityCast at checkout. That's auraframes.com, promo code CityCast. This deal is exclusive to listeners, and frames sell out fast, so order yours now to get it in time for the holidays. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply. So let me stop on one note of skepticism, because, you and I have worked together for a long time. I hear a lot, the restaurant industry is in great danger, that, such and such places have closed, that sort of thing. Isn't this just in the nature of restaurants? It's a small margin business and places go in and out of fashion. Like, how do we tell a slump from just run-of-the-mill churn in a really volatile industry?
It is a really volatile industry, and it's also a very volatile time, right? Like, we're just coming out of the pandemic, and there are so many things happening. I do think businesses were seeing an uptick the last couple years as, coming out of the pandemic. And there has been a swing in the other direction this year. And some of these factors are just kind of undeniable, and their impact on the local economy.
Has it manifested in more closures than usual?
We'll see. So the Restaurant Association, Metropolitan Washington, they say that DC is on track for a record number of closures this year. At the same time, we are still seeing more openings than closures. So that's maybe a positive sign. Of course, restaurants plan to open years prior. So I think a big question also is, in the years to come, what effect will that have in terms of new openings? Because I do know a few people who are kind of putting pause on opening new concepts because they feel like things are going to get worse before they get better.
So right there in your headline, besides the word slump, there's the word Trump. And you covered this industry during the first Trump presidency, which was animated by some of these famous scenes of like Trump insiders being hounded at restaurants. What's different with their role in this story? And I don't mean like the administration is going to fire a lot of people, but I mean the actual social presence in Washington of people around the president.
Yeah. So that's the other side of this picture that is in some ways opposite of what we're seeing at large. You may recall during the first Trump administration, all these high-profile confrontations that happened in dining rooms with administration officials. I think the most famous one being Sarah Huckabee Sanders, being kicked out of a restaurant in Virginia. And there are a number of other examples. And so most of the Trump officials, White House officials, cabinet secretaries, they really congregated at the Trump Hotel, which of course no longer exists. But I think it's fair to say that Trump world returned to DC this time around with a lot more swagger. And that also extends to the way that they've approached the dining scene. There was one manager who basically said there was kind of this attitude of, I don't give a F, who knows I'm MAGA, that, there are a few people who said that Trump world seemed a little bit more out and about on the town. They're spending money, big money sometimes. In some ways, like, that's good for certain businesses.
Well, yeah. I mean, so this would argue against us, or this would be something that reduces the scope of the slump. If young MAGAs and not so young MAGAs are out there spending their money, at least at a few places they deem friendly.
Yeah. So, and the one example I feel like really crystallizes this tension is this fine dining manager telling me about how more frequently it was kind of the Republican type people that they could identify who were spending really big and maybe buying an expensive bottle of wine, but that the excitement over that $1,000 bottle of wine wasn't quite what it used to be, because maybe that server was only overseeing like 3 tables when normally they'd have 5 tables. So yes, that's great. It's huge. We're so happy to have that big ticket. But like overall business is down, and that's not just bad for the business. That's bad overall if you're a server for your tips.
Donald Trump himself has said that thanks to his police takeover, the DC dining scene is booming. Have they said anything to you or to anyone else about this slump?
No, I mean, obviously Trump has, his own reality of what is happening in DC and DC restaurants. And anyone who's actually in the industry will tell you, that's just not the reality of what's going on the ground.
There's this weird tension here where, like, the vibes in DC are bad. And I think particularly for both patrons and workers in restaurants, these are, some of the groups that feel most beleaguered by this moment. On the other hand, tip-based professions are not historically known for speaking truth to power, right? You're going to be a gracious host to anyone who walks in the door and is willing to spend money in your place. And that seems to be what's going on, at least in theory. Is there other stuff happening in sort of back of the house where people are grumbling when prominent Trump figures come in?
Yeah, we haven't seen a lot of that, despite maybe a larger MAGA presence on the scene more widely. I feel like there were many more acts of resistance, high profile, images of resistance in the first Trump administration.
I mean, you quoted this bartender called Nancy, who said, this person theoretically has the power to take away your rights, but I have the power to make you wait 20 minutes to get your entree. Is that going on?
I haven't heard a specific real life example of that. I know people have said that that's what they would do hypothetically. I think that there could be some more subtle subterfuge like that. But I think also, there's a real fear right now, just not only the potential backlash, from Trump or from whatever political figure, but from the culture at large. Things are so divisive that if someone found out you were making someone wait, an extra 20 minutes for a table because they worked in this administration, like, you would be dragged on the internet and, probably get death threats and all these other things. So I do think there's a level of fear also that existed in the first Trump administration, but has absolutely intensified this time around.
Another thing that maybe would be a boon to restaurants in Washington is there is a general sense of the federal government like backing off enforcement on all kinds of good government stuff, which often governed like how much can lobbyists spend to take you out to eat and that sort of thing. are places that cater to that kind of crowd reporting, that sort of business doing better?
I think that is true for a certain type of restaurant. There was an owner for a downtown restaurant that definitely caters a lot of political events. And he said, the Republican money is flowing very freely. And he mentioned how, there are all these government restrictions on how lobbyists and foreign lobbyists can spend money. But just to quote him directly, he said, there don't seem to be as many rules right now, or maybe they're being interpreted differently or not enforced.
So it's a bit like, we've talked about this phenomenon in local real estate too, where the very, very, very top of the market, the Mark Zuckerberg's house kind of sales, are through the roof. But the kind of houses that everyone else lives in, there's softening, there's a lot of anxiety about whether those are going to hold their value. And it seems like what you're describing is that like a rather small number of places with a draw to either people around the administration or the general sort of influence trade seem like they've got real opportunity, and the other folks you talk to are reporting a lot of worry.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you host fundraisers, particularly Republican fundraisers, it's not a terrible time, but even that restaurateur who I just quoted, he also is feeling some of the effects that we've discussed so far. So it's not like, oh, these are boom times for me as well.
You mentioned that a lot of restaurants, particularly the upper end restaurants, they're years in the planning, and I assume in the financing and all kinds of things. So there's a lot of openings happening now that were probably hashed out 2 or 3 years ago. Do you have a sense that there's less planning going on, or that there's less things sort of at the innovation stage now, where people are going to try to get financing and try to get something going that would probably not naturally open for another couple of years?
Yeah, I know for sure. Then there are people, quoted in this article saying exactly that. One bar owner who had the opportunity to take over this space. I can't say which space it was, but it was kind of like an iconic space. And this was like his dream to take it over. And he told the landlord he was going to back out, that he wasn't going to do the deal. And a big part of that was, he's scared of what DC is going to look like. He doesn't know if Trump is going to unleash more military on the streets, but also, finding workers to literally build out the restaurant. He had another project in the works and was struggling to find the people to work on that project. So to start a whole nother project, he wasn't sure how he was going to make that happen either.
So you also follow trends, the rest of the country, the rest of the world. Obviously, the rest of the country is having a lot of the same challenges as people here in terms of affordability, in terms of worries about the economy, in terms of, the stock market's gone way up, but now there's a lot of jitters about it. Is what's happening to restaurants in Washington notably different than what's happening in other markets?
I think we do feel it more acutely here. Certainly not all these factors are specific to DC. I mean, there are immigration raids happening in many cities around the country, for example. Things like tariffs obviously affect businesses all around the country. But obviously Washington is unique in that this is a company town and the government is the company. And we do feel things, especially the federal workforce, and the instability there. And just in the culture and the mood, I think people pay attention, obviously, to politics here in a way that they don't in many other cities. And so it's just something that is always in the air. And just going back to those vibes, how so much of restaurants is based on what is the vibe of the city, the vibe of the scene. And right now, it doesn't feel great.
there historically has been an unwritten rule in Washington that like the big shots of politics can be civilians when they're, out with their family or eating or something like that. That rule was really put under a lot of duress during the first Trump administration. What's the state of that, and how does that connect to like whether restaurants in Washington writ large are thriving or not?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe surprisingly, there haven't been too many confrontations that you might expect given the general mood of things. But again, I think it goes back to that fear. Just one, it seems like kind of a silly example, but, the political cocktail, which is just this quintessential DC thing where bars and restaurants will play off of whatever the political headline of the day is, name a drink, something silly or mocking. And those were so prevalent in the first Trump administration, making light of the impeachment hearings and presidential firings and things like that. Those are pretty much gone now because restaurants and bars are just afraid of the backlash that would bring. So if something as small as, the name of a cocktail is affected, you can see what the greater effect of that would be.
Just for the record, I'm very happy to be done with the political named cocktail for reasons entirely apolitical.
Fair enough.
So you put on your predictor hat. Do you think DC's restaurants come out of this soon? Not soon? What's your own feeling about the next year or 5?
I would say the feeling in the restaurant community right now is that things are going to get worse before they get better. Who knows? There's so many factors, right? It's hard to say what's going to happen. But, there are always ups and downs in DC, in the economy, in the restaurant scene. I don't think this is the apocalypse for DC restaurants.
But it does herald like a secular change, not cyclical. That like, if it is true that we will now always have a smaller world of immigrants, and if it is true that Washington will always have a smaller main industry, those are not things that rise and fall like the stock market.
Well, new administrations come and go, right? And so it's hard to say what's going to happen in, 3 years from now, or even, next year with the midterms. Like, does that have an effect? Things are always going to be cyclical, and we'll just have to see what happens.
Jess, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And before we go, thank you to our new CityCast DC members, Allie J. and Monica R. You are the best. And you can become a member at membership.citycast.fm. And that is all for today here on CityCast DC. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our morning newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye.